Hi everyone, and thanks for joining me today for some virtual vitamin Z as we bring the Detroit Zoo to you. My name is Claire and I'm a curator of education with the Detroit Zoological Society, where we are celebrating and saving wildlife. And today we're going to talk about a species that the Detroit Zoological Society is working really hard to help protect. And oftentimes when we think of conservation, we think of way off locales and exotic places. But this is a species that we're helping right in our own backyards and shorelines. So let's look at a couple vocabulary words that we're going to talk about today in the course of our learning adventure. And those words include endangered, shoreline, and incubation. And if you're familiar with the word incubation, you might have guessed that we're going to talk about a species of animal that lays eggs. And you're right. Today we're going to be talking about piping plovers. Piping plovers are a small shorebird that live on shorelines in a couple different places in the United States. And there's three distinct geographic populations. So let's check out my globe so we can see where those are. So there's some that live on the Atlantic coast of the United States. There's some that live on some of the big rivers that go through the middle of the continental United States. And then there's another population that lives right around Michigan on the shorelines of the Great Lakes. So we're going to talk about the piping plovers that live on the shores of the Great Lakes. And to do that, let me introduce you to what a piping plover looks like. So they live in those three different locations, and at one point, the scientists realized that there was an issue. This is about 35 years ago. The Great Lakes population was down to just 17 nesting pairs, 34 birds in total. So they realized there was an issue, and we realized that we needed to do something and do something quickly. The scientists started observing the birds and watching what was going on, and they noticed that some of the nests were being abandoned. So there was just eggs being left out there unattended. And the scientists decided if we took these eggs and we raised them until they were adults and then released them back into the wild, this could help bring the population back from the brink of extinction. So they contacted the Detroit Zoological Society. Now, we have a lot of expertise in bird care and in incubation. So we developed a rearing program, and we started going out on the beaches and watching these nests. Now, there's a lot of reasons that a parent bird might not come back to the nest. They could have been killed by a predator. Sometimes they're scared off. Actually, when dogs are not kept on a leash and run up and down the beaches, oftentimes that can scare a parent bird away from the nest and won't return. And sometimes it's nature too. A big storm might come through and wash some of these nests out into the lake. So the staff would watch these nests, and when they realized that one had been abandoned, they would scoop up the eggs and bring them in for captive rearing. And if a big storm was coming in, they might pull the eggs and put in fake eggs into the nest so the parents would continue sitting on them, but keep those eggs overnight safe in an incubator, and the next morning after the storm passed, if the nest was still there, they could put the eggs back out and the parents could continue rearing them. So this is a picture of the captive rearing facility, and this is up at the University of Michigan's biological station. So the DZS oversees the incubation and the rearing programs in this building, and this is in Pellston, Michigan, which is right up near the Mackinac Bridge. This is the incubator. The eggs will stay in here for up to 4 weeks. The incubator is a really special machine that's kept at the exact right temperature. So it's the exact same as if mom or dad were sitting on top of the egg, but instead it's kept inside this controlled environment so that staff can keep a really close eye on them. And then after that 4 weeks, they hatch out, and they're pretty mobile, which means they start moving around pretty quickly after they hatch out. It does take 2 to 4 days to get them out of the egg, so it's a long, hard process. And those newly hatched chicks weigh about as much as 3 pennies, so they're tiny. The animal care staff have described them as cotton balls on toothpick legs. So now that they're hatched out, the animal care staff have to start feeding them around the clock. They provide a variety of different insects. They also provide them access to insects in controlled areas outside so they can learn how to forage and eat on their own, so they'll be successful as they grow up. Within 2 weeks, they start getting flight feathers. At about 2.5 weeks, they start to stretch their wings. And by the time they're 3.5 weeks old, they are starting to fly pretty well. So this whole process goes by pretty quickly. Once they're about at that stage, they start to put them outside in this very large enclosure. And part of the enclosure is on the shoreline, and part of it goes into the lake. And this is so piping plovers can learn how to be piping plovers while still being completely safe from predators. So it's a pretty neat setup. And they have to learn all these skills because by the end of summer, they need to start migrating back down to the south of the United States where they're going to spend their winter. And let's see if I can get this video to show, because it's too... All right, we're not going to get the video to show, so I'll send that to you all later so you can see it. It's on our blog post, but you can see some of the birds exploring out into the lake and learning how to bathe and forage for the insects on their own. It's just a really short clip. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you the story of Smalls. So Smalls, from his very first moments, he had a really hard time getting out of his egg. He required round-the-clock care. He had issues with his umbilical cord. He had a crooked toe. The animal care staff were concerned that his vision was impaired, and he stayed pretty small. While all the rest of the hatchling mates were growing up and getting larger, Smalls stayed small. But the animal care staff were determined. They were going to give Smalls every possible chance to succeed at life. He really became a symbol of the importance of one. So the summer of 2015 is when he was growing up, and 7 piping plover chicks in total were released up in northern Michigan, and 5 have since been spotted by birders, 1 down in South Carolina and 4 down in Florida. And I can't tell you how excited I am to share with you and how overjoyed the animal care staff were to find out that one of those birds spotted was Smalls. Smalls was spotted and photographed by a couple on a beach in Little Talbot Island in Florida. And he really resembles the importance of an individual bird and an individual animal, as the DZS is so committed to the individual success of each animal. And in Smalls' case, because he is part of an endangered species, his significance is even greater, since every single piping plover we need to get back into that population to make it more robust. So with this captive breeding program, about 9 out of every 10 eggs turn into adults that can then be released into the wild. If they were just the eggs on the beach with the parents taking care of them, that survival rate varies a little bit. It's about 1 in every 4 to 3 in every 4. So our captive breeding program has actually been incredibly successful, which is great for the piping plover population. Since we started working with this population, we have successfully raised 238 piping plovers to be released back into the population in the world, which is incredible. This year, we're making plans for the 2020 nesting season. Even though there's a pandemic going on, these piping plovers still need our help. So the staff is working really hard at thinking about what this season could look like and how we can go up and continue helping the piping plovers and raise them from those eggs all the way up to the adults and release them. Now you might be thinking, well, what can I do to help birds like piping plovers or piping plovers themselves? And I have a couple suggestions for you. The first, if you're visiting any of our shorelines, especially up in northern Michigan on those beaches, if you have a companion animal with you, keep that animal leashed. You want to make sure that he or she doesn't run around and accidentally scare off a bird or crush a nest by mistake. And you should also watch where you're stepping. Oftentimes these nests are hidden on the beach, and you have to kind of pay attention to where you're going so you don't actually accidentally crush a nest. Now, if you're over 21, last summer, Griffin Brewing Company up in Birmingham, Michigan, released one of our series of conservation beers to help support our conservation. And they released the Piping Plover Pilsner. And it's available at Griffin Claw and a couple other liquor stores around the area. So you could enjoy a Pilsner while you're supporting the Piping Plover efforts. And the third thing is, I know that there's a lot of creative people out there. And we're in the age of memes and communicating information in short and succinct and engaging ways. So conservationists also attempt to do this, and they do this by putting signs up on the shorelines, something like this. Now these might catch your attention, but would they last with you long enough to remember throughout your visit to the beach that you should be looking out for shorebirds that are nesting? So I'd like to challenge any of you who would like to get your creative juices going into creating some sort of an engaging, exciting sign that we could post out on beaches where piping plovers and other shorebirds nest to remind beachgoers that they're sharing the space with other species. And if you're up for the challenge, send me your design to education@dzs.org, and I'll share them with our animal care staff. And who knows, the next time you go to one of our shorelines, maybe you'll see your sign up there reminding people that we share the space with other species and to be careful. So today we talked about piping plovers, this tiny shoreline bird who needed our help bringing him back from the brink of extinction. And we've had great success in the captive rearing program as we've salvaged eggs that have been abandoned and raised them to adults and then released them back into that population. And we talked about a couple ways that you can help them too, both from enjoying a Pilsner to making a sign to even just being careful on your next beach visit. So today we have some more virtual vitamin Z for you. At 2 o'clock, my friend and colleague Sandy will be on, and we'll be talking with Dr. Ruth Marsick from the National Amphibian Conservation Center, and she'll be answering some questions about a really exciting recent development in the National Amphibian Conservation Center. So you don't want to miss that at 2. And Zara's on at 4 o'clock. She has some more exciting information and activities to share with you as well for some more virtual vitamin Z. So until then, stay safe and take care of each other.